A day after the Alaska summit, outlines have emerged of peace proposals discussed by Russia's Vladimir Putin and his US counterpart Donald Trump. Now, according to reports which cited official sources, Russia proposed relinquishing tiny pockets of occupied Ukraine, and in return, Kiev would cede swathes of its eastern land, which Moscow has been unable to capture. Well, Trump had confirmed in an interview with Fox News that he and Putin discussed land transfers along with security guarantees for Ukraine and had largely agreed. Sources said that under the proposed Russian deal, Kiev would fully withdraw from the eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions in return for the Russians' pledge to freeze the front lines in the southern regions of Kherson and Zaporizhia. Well, post-meeting with Putin, Trump briefed Zelensky and European leaders on the summit discussions. Trump said that Ukraine should make a deal with Russia because Russia is very big and they're not.
Look, Russia's a very big power. And they're not. They're great soldiers, and they have great, but, you know, they also had the best equipment. You know, they had our equipment. And I gave them javelins, if you remember, in my first term. In fact, there was a statement, I gave javelins. You remember this?
Putin's offer ruled out a ceasefire until a comprehensive deal is reached, blocking a key demand of Zelensky, whose country is hit daily by Russian drones and ballistic missiles. Now, Zelensky said that Russia's refusal to accept a ceasefire was complicating the efforts to end the war. He expressed skepticism about the future, pondering over the bigger question: how to get Russia to have the will to implement far greater peaceful coexistence with its neighbors for decades. Now, Zelensky is due to travel to Washington on Monday to discuss with Trump a possible settlement of the full-scale war. Reports say that European leaders are invited to come along with Zelensky. The French presidency, meanwhile, said that the leaders of Britain, France and Germany will host a video call on Sunday involving Kiev's allies in a coalition of the willing to discuss steps towards peace in Ukraine. And for more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Glenn Diesen from Oslo. He's a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway and an editor at the Russia in Global Affairs journal. Thank you so much, Dr. Diesen, for joining us on the broadcast.
Well, thank you so much.
Dr. Diesen, let's start with your assessment of the Alaska summit and the outlines that have emerged now.
Well, I think the Alaska summit actually went quite well. There wasn't any big agreements being made. But as Trump said, there's no deal until a deal has been made. That is, everything has to be in place. I think overall, there's two conflicting positions which is being taken. Do we have a ceasefire or address the root causes? And for Russia, the root causes, well, most importantly, is NATO expansionism. Now, if you look at the European argument, they see that the war began as an unprovoked Russian aggression or expansionism, and for this reason the solution has to be a ceasefire to stop the rapid Russian advances and give the Europeans time to rebuild the Ukrainian army. And as the British suggest, maybe even send their own troops to Ukraine. Russia argues, on the other hand, that as it has argued since the 1990s, that the NATO expansionism is an existential threat. And this was the reason for its special military operation. And from their perspective, ceasefire is not peace. It will merely give the Europeans and, well, Americans as well, time to prolong the war. And so from their perspective, the solution has to be a political settlement. And this requires not just looking at Ukraine, because Ukraine is not the source of this conflict. Ukraine is a product. A division of Europe and essentially the new Cold War. So they would like to first come to a political settlement and then stop the fighting. And it appears that after the meeting between Trump and Putin, that Trump accepted the Russian position. Either he recognizes or agree with it, or he just realizes that Russia is winning the war, so he doesn't hold that many cards. But the next step appears to Trump to go to Ukraine and to the Europeans to convey the message, because at the end of the day, it's the Americans who have the power, who's keeping this war going. So he will probably put a lot of pressure on the Europeans and Zelensky to move towards this settlement.
Absolutely, Dr. Deason, and we saw that Putin was quite successful in conveying and reiterating his demands, which have not budged since day one of the war began. Now, President Trump also wants Zelensky to agree to a permanent peace deal, which is going to bypass a ceasefire, but that could mean major territorial losses and also compromises on Ukraine's red lines. Now, having said that, we know that after the meeting with Putin, Trump has put the onus of striking a deal solely upon Ukraine with, of course, European allies. And now, what do you make of it? And what do you think is going to be the realistic plan going forward for Ukraine and the European allies?
Well, it's not going to be easy because, again, what Russia asks for is not just the neutrality for Ukraine and end to NATO expansionism, but it's also these territorial concessions as a result of 3.5 years of fighting. So for the Europeans who bet everything on this war to defeat the Russians, they seem to be losing everything now. That is, they see the weakening of the political partnership with the United States. They have economic decline. They have political problems, and so there's a lot of resistance towards this. And it's also within the United States. Keep in mind that in Washington, most of them would like to continue the war. That is that Trump is a bit of an anti-establishment figure, as we know. So this isn't popular in any way. So in some way, the Russians will also have to come and make some concessions. And I think in the territorial area, this might be a possibility. That is, they can, the Russians have laid claim, for example, to territory in Zaporozhye and Kherson, which they don't even control yet. So there might be some willingness to essentially freeze the borders in Zaporozhye and Kherson if they can get Donetsk in return, and then they can also pull out of Sumy, Kharkov, and Dnipro. So there are areas for compromise, but I think the overarching problem to be solved is the issue of NATO expansion, and of course not just reconsidering some of the things we've done over the past 3.5 years, but even going back to the 1990s. So there's a huge task ahead of us, and as you said, the Russians haven't changed their position at all. Again, they see this as an existential threat, and they will not budge on the key issues, especially now that they are obviously winning the war. Some argue that the war has already been won. I think this is also correct. So they're not really in a position anymore to have to make any painful compromises. And I think every day that passes, the Russians will only be in a bigger, a stronger and stronger position. So I think Trump also recognizes this, because the problem of keeping this war going for much longer is the Ukrainians losing too many men, either losses or fleeing the country. They're losing more territory, the infrastructure being destroyed. It's a possibility Ukraine might not be able to recover as a nation. So there is a need to get this over with, and then find a enduring political settlement. So, but as I said, Trump has a huge task ahead of him, because there's a lot of opposition who do not want to see this agreement go through.
Absolutely, Dr. Deason. There's a lot at stake for all the parties involved, and we'll have to wait and see what comes out of the trilateral, which Trump has now said that it may happen as soon as August 22nd. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
My pleasure.